5 years. The Romans call that a lustrum. Some call it a quinquennial, but whatever you call it, it's been a great time of community building, learning, partnering, and having fun. So, but it's also a great time to look forward, and which is what we're going to do today with our panelists, looking at the future of international travel after COVID-19 vaccinations. But before we get started, I want to give a big thanks to our host, Global Washington, for all they do in our community, and particularly all they've done in support of this to keep this meeting going. If you or your organization are not members of Global Washington, please do check out the website and have a conversation with Kristen and Pratima about the benefits of joining. We do 4 things with the Final Mile. We learn. Today, we're going to hear from a panel from Delta Airlines, Qatar Airways, and Diversity Travel, who will give us their expert look ahead at international travel. We network. At the end of this program, we'll engage in a full half hour of network breakout rooms to see old friends and meet new. We troubleshoot. For this meeting, we anticipate a lot of questions, but if you have any pressing issue that you're having issues with in this Final Mile space, please do message me and we'll bring it up at the next meeting. And we have fun. Now, I'm sure that there are some pretty sad stories about quarantine, but there's some that really aren't so bad when you think about it. Take me. I could not take a trip to Fiji in 2020 because of COVID. That's sad. However, all the years prior, I could not take a trip to Fiji because it was too expensive. Not so sad. So that was a joke, of course. We all love to travel. And the Puget Sound Business Journal last week reported that 67% of Americans plan to travel by air, 67% plan to travel by air this summer, and 53% plan to splurge more on their trips. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but of the top 10 destinations, 5 were US domestic, 4 were in Mexico, and the last was Dominican Republic. So not to slight Mexico or the Dominican Republic, but international has yet to gain a solid foothold in our flight plans. We need it to. And we need our international carriers and travel partners to not only survive, but to also thrive, to do everything we do overseas. We need to both physically reach those final mile destinations in body, but also for our freight shipments to ride in the belly of the aircraft that would not move without passengers. Everyone needs financial resources to provide the best service. We need these organizations to be successful ourselves. So in those Final Mile announcements that I put out, I've been referring to our presenters today as a panel of experts, but I would now like to introduce them as partners to the mission. Let's get to it and let's meet our partners. First up is Donald Cox. Donald is a Managing Director of International Strategy and Planning for Delta Airlines. Donald has an 18-year legacy with Delta Airlines starting in 2003 in network planning and senior analyst, and kept climbing to general manager before moving on to more people-centric roles in customer experience, sales, and market development starting in 2011. Today, he joins us from Atlanta, Georgia, where he has to have one of the most challenging roles in the airline industry today, Managing Director of International Strategy and Planning in the time of a pandemic. Don earned his Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering at Georgia Tech before he discovered the ACC and completed his MBA at Duke University. Welcome, Don.
Wow, thank you, Eric. Really appreciate the kind introduction. So I've got a few remarks prepared for you all, and I've got a few slides, but maybe I'll just speak off the cuff a little bit to get started. Sitting here from my seat at Delta, it's been the most challenging year and a half of my career easily. And I'm someone that joined the company right after 9/11, and I went through a Chapter 11 restructuring, went through a large merger, gone through other financial crises, and this just absolutely dwarfs anything else that I've experienced in my career. And for those of you who may be in the travel industry or have been for some time, I'm sure you'll agree as well. That said, it does feel like we're on the brink of coming out of it. And just a few days ago, pretty much the last of the major European EU markets announced that they're reopening to US travelers. So really, it's just the UK, when you talk about at least the markets that Delta flies to in Europe, that it isn't open for leisure travel at this point. And we are definitely seeing a pretty sharp spike in bookings and in demand as these announcements happen. So maybe with that, let me see if I can figure out how to show my screen. I'll show a few slides. Okay. So, I'll start with basically where are we flying today, where are we going to be flying in the next several months as the pandemic hopefully winds down. The red lines you see on this map, just looking at our Seattle, Washington hub, at which we've been the largest international carrier for as long as I have data, which dates back at least 15 years. We're continuing to serve Paris and Amsterdam, our two primary European hubs. The Netherlands just announced over the weekend that now you no longer have to have a test to transit via the Netherlands, nor do you have to have, nor is there entry, are there any more entry restrictions to get into the Netherlands? So that's really outstanding news. France as well is now accepting US travelers. So we're definitely seeing the result of that in terms of forward bookings. London, staying on the European side, is a market that we've been sort of off again, on again a little bit here as we've been anxiously awaiting the UK's reopening, and hopefully that'll happen again very, very soon. On the Asia Pacific side, we've been serving Tokyo, Seoul, and Shanghai throughout the pandemic, albeit at reduced frequency. In Asia, pretty much is still relatively closed to US customers at this juncture. Beijing is a market that, once China opens up more fully, will come back for us. And then, Eric, to your point on Mexico, we have taken advantage of that situation and started year-round daily service to 3 of the predominant beach destinations in Mexico from Seattle, and we'll continue to serve those markets year-round daily after it's done. A lot of demand for beaches in Mexico, as again, that's one of the few places that's open for US tourists. Now, to make travel easier for our customers, because we know that it's complicated, it's really complicated. These restrictions are changing every day. Testing requirements changing every day. We have worked really hard to create an experience on delta.com to help customers navigate all these complexities. So first off, you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen here, it's a map with a dot for every city that we serve. And you can click on that. You can see at a glance, is this market open? What are some of the requirements? You can drill in to get even more details on those requirements. And if you press on those little plus marks on the right, you can get even more detail down to links for specific testing sites in the cities that you may be going to, and very explicit details on many of the local regulations and government restrictions. So this we really try to keep updated, and we've got a very tight turnaround time anytime one of these restrictions changes. We've got a great process where we're really connected with our government affairs teams and other industry bodies, and really try to keep this resource updated for our customers. Also, I think testing is going to be with us for a while. And when the US in particular imposed the inbound testing requirement for customers returning to the US, we really invested a lot in making sure that we had these resources available for customers wherever they might be traveling to around the globe. And through those partnerships with the testing providers, we've actually had a few new things develop, like Illume, for instance. This is a new testing product that you can take with you where you're going. And if the US requires a test on the inbound from that destination, you can be observed by someone who will watch you take the test to confirm it's you. You can send the sample back. They'll actually, it may be back in like 15 minutes. I think it's a rapid test that they can observe you and you can get your result and travel back. This is way better than what we had in the past. And hopefully we'll make it much easier for customers returning to the US. But we do have an expanded network of partnerships with testing providers. So wherever you are, you should be able to get the test that you need. Additionally, there's a lot of documentation that's required when you travel. Some places require specific types of PCR tests. So one of the things we've developed along with our partners Virgin Atlantic is the Delta Fly Ready experience, where once you book your flight, you upload or you can schedule a COVID test. You can upload those results so we can see it. It enables a streamlined check-in process where you don't have to get in line and show your documents to an agent, and really improve the customer experience. This is something that we hope to expand to vaccinations later in the summer. That's something that definitely an enhancement that we know we're going to need, and also expand the markets beyond just the UK for this pilot. But definitely something that we're investing in, given, again, we expect these requirements to be with us for some period of time. And then maybe lastly, to wrap it up, a lot of the things that we've been doing to keep customers safe during the pandemic, we're obviously continuing. The most noteworthy of which is the mask requirement. Many of these things will be with us for some period of time as well. So with that, I'll wrap it up. And thanks for your time, and look forward to speaking with you further during the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, Don. Next up is Nikita Sharan, Senior Accountant Manager from Qatar Airways. Nikita is the newest member of Qatar Airways sales team and is in charge of travel management companies and retail agencies in the Pacific Northwest region. Prior to joining Qatar, she handled corporate sales for Emirates Airlines and began her airline career over 20 years ago with Alaska Airlines. Nikita is an avid traveler and is planning to visit her 7th continent in 2022. I will add that Nikki has been a very active colleague in our community and a valued voice at Global Washington events. She doesn't know this fact, but her rave travel reviews are also the reason my wife and I traveled to Egypt prior to the pandemic this past year. Welcome, Nikki. Yep, you're muted. Hey. Not yet.
I can't hear you.
Nikki, you might need to hit the small arrow next to the mute button and change the source for the select the microphone.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We do love these technical difficulties, don't we? Thank you, Eric, for that introduction, and thank you, Global Washington. It's really great to be back and see familiar faces here on the panel and familiar names in the audience. Eric, we did have a slight change in schedule for the lineup, and Craig was supposed to speak next. So I can go ahead and do my piece now. It's Craig, is that okay with you? Okay. So I would like to just cover 3 tips for anyone that's planning an international trip. I know that it seems a really daunting thing to think about, but now it's more of a reality than things were perhaps 3 months and certainly 6 and 9 months ago. So if you are planning an international trip, whether it's for leisure, whether it's for work, or our favorite leisure trips, here are 3 things that you need to keep in mind. One, like Dawn mentioned, requirements change, if not by the hour, then by the day, and certainly by the week, based on where you're looking to travel. So please, please, please keep checking to see what the destination requirements are specific to where you're going. This is imperative, both in terms of the kinds of tests that are required and also the duration of if your test needs to be administered 72 hours before your departure, if it's 48 hours, if it's 24 hours. So please check that well in advance. And once you've made your booking, don't think you're off the hook, because you need to keep updating yourself weeks and days leading up to your trip, and certainly the day of as well. Secondly, this is something that is really important these days. I'm sure, I know everyone on this panel and certainly some in the audience, we've all been road warriors at one point in our lives. And we have had our travel routine down to a pat. I know I've been very guilty of leaving the house, timing my Uber ride to the airport, and probably strolling into SeaTac a good 45 minutes before my flight leaves, and not having to worry about anything. But those days are long behind us. So please give yourself lots of time anytime you're traveling, whether it's domestic or international. One thing we can guarantee, that every vendor you come across in your travels these days, whether it's your Uber driver, whether it's your check-in staff, whether it's TSA, whether it's Starbucks at the Sea Concourse at SeaTac, everybody is shorthanded, everyone is understaffed. So please do yourself a favor, get to the airport early. We're talking 2 hours before a domestic flight. And I know that that's unheard of for most of us, but please do that these days, and 3.5 to 4 hours before an international flight. And this is extremely important these days, because sometimes if you get to the airport in certain cities or destinations where a certain PCR test may be required, and you find out at the check-in counter that you have the wrong result or the wrong test administered, there are sites set up at certain cities and countries where you can actually zip down the hall and get the correct test and get your results back. So if you get to the airport late and you're not doing this, your trip is really going to be ruined. So please exercise some patience. Let's zen out together, get to the airport early, and let's make your experience much more pleasant than it could be. Lastly, a lot of corporate travel has been paused, and we were very cognizant of this, and everyone is eager to get back on the road. So I think it's really important for travelers to perhaps set the example and take the first step. Be the first one in your organization to plan a trip, to go to an international destination, to see if a client is ready to meet. I think once more people start doing this, organizations, corporations, offices will be more readily accepting of the idea that, yes, the world is opening up. Perhaps it is time to get off the Zoom life and actually start meeting in person. And let's face it, travel, it's always been fun. And after the year we've all had, it's really time to relax and get some joy out of destinations. And, you know, who knows, maybe Eric will head back to Egypt on Qatar Airways this time and have a better experience than he did last March when he had to rush back home. So, so please take the first step, get back in the skies, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. That was very, very good. And we do want to get back to Egypt. Next up is Beverly Weir, Senior Vice President of Sales and Account Management for Diversity Travel. Beverly has over 25 years of experience in corporate housing and the travel industry. For the past 10 years, Beverly has focused exclusively on supporting the nonprofit community and the unique needs of international NGOs. She uses her expert knowledge to oversee Diversity Travel's growth plan for the United States market and their account management program supporting the travel programs of NGOs worldwide. She is on the advisory board for the Diversity Foundation, as well as being active in her local community. Welcome, Beverly.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Global Washington, for having me as part of this panel. Welcome to the audience as well. I have put together a couple of slides I wanted to share with you. We're going to talk about what you can expect, or what we're doing to support our partners as they return to the skies, as we all want to get back to action. And I know that a lot of the NGOs that we work with, they're anxious to get their boots back on the ground. So I'll share my screen. Put this in. So a little bit, Eric told you a little bit about me. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Diversity Travel. We are a full service travel management company. However, we're different than most. And what makes us different is that we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, foundations, and aid and relief organizations, and some B corporations as well. So we have a unique service offering and have expert travel consultants as a result of that because of our focus. We find that with the nonprofit community, as well as with aid and relief, your travel patterns are quite different from that of typical corporations. You're traveling to more fragile areas of the world, and also your travel is sometimes last minute. It changes frequently, so it's important that you work with someone who is an expert at that type of travel, because again, it is quite different. So our consultants are experts at working with complex itineraries and getting to these more remote areas of the world. We have always done this, but it has changed from the onset of the pandemic, and that's policy compliance. We found that on the onset of the pandemic, policy was changing almost on a daily basis. We were getting calls from global security and safety teams saying, okay, we need to now block China. Then it was Asia. Then it was, we've got travelers who are in the Middle East and we need to get them all back. So it was a constantly evolving situation where we helped the organizations and their travelers stay within policy. That also falls into duty of care, making sure that those global safety and security folks, or even for some of our smaller NGO partners, it might be someone in human resources, has the visual as to where their travelers are at any given time. So we want to make sure that we're supporting duty of care. We know where people are, and if needed, we can pull them out, with short notice. We also have, because we do focus exclusively on nonprofit organizations, we work with 44 airlines, including those on the panel today. Delta and Qatar are great partners of ours in providing humanitarian airfares to our nonprofit organizations. And they come with some flexibility in their ticketing conditions, and that they can be used globally one way, and they also are refundable. This was really important, especially when you're using donor funds and you have limited funds to use for your travel program. If they were to have had non-refundable tickets, there would have been a great financial loss to some of these organizations, whereas these humanitarian airfares are quite flexible and refundable. So it's a great benefit. And again, thanks to Delta and Qatar for partnering with us on those. Our consultants are also keeping track of what's going on with airports and airlines. Some airlines are requiring specific type of mask. Rather than wearing a gaiter or a bandana, you have to have an N95 mask. And so we're supporting our travelers by letting them know what the airline restrictions are. We're sharing information on what airlines are doing as far as COVID and cleanliness. And that information comes directly from the airline partners. Also, airports. All of the airports have different restrictions, and that comes into play when we talk about whether or not you want to transit through a particular airport. What rules and regulations are they imposing right now? Are they going to, pull you off and make you quarantine because you didn't get that test? So it's really important that you understand what is going on with the airports as well as with the airlines. We're supporting visa requirements, talking about transit points. There's been a lot of change. We're starting to see things return to normal, if that ever will be the word to use. However, there are some places now where you wouldn't want to transit. Also, the visa requirements for folks who don't hold a U.S. passport come into play when it comes to Schengen and such. So we're really trying to educate all of our travelers on what to expect when they return to travel. What the requirements will be. We're also reporting on hotels and their COVID cleanliness policies. Is that that varies from chain to chain, and then it also varies from ownership. So we're making all of this information available to our travelers. The last thing, and we do this even pre-COVID, it's really important if you do have a travel management partner that they're available 24/7. So at Diversity Travel, we don't have a call center for after hours. Outside of normal business hours, we actually have staff that are working shifts that follow the sun, so that if your traveler is stuck or the flight's been canceled or delayed and they need to reach somebody, there's always somebody who's at their desk and ready to take that call. We find that oftentimes when people are calling in the middle of the night, it's urgent, it's an emergency. So they have the confidence in the fact that they're going to get a Diversity Travel agent on the phone and somebody who can quickly assess the situation and help them get on their way. In addition to supporting the travelers, we also support the NGO community. We're members of Global Washington and proud to be so. We're also members of Humentum, which I know many of the organizations that are in the audience today are members of Humentum as well. We have lots of resources on our website. So we have a microsite that's completely about COVID. So things that you can expect while traveling. Can you travel? We've put together a guide on restarting your travel program, again, all accessible from our website. We also partnered with the Cornerstone Foundation and Disaster Ready and put together, it's about a 25-minute course on managing your travel in a crisis. And that is available to anyone that's on this call. If you'd like to access it, you do need to register with disasterready.org. It's free to do so, and then you can access the class. And then last but not least, we recently partnered with Sherpa. It's a Canadian company that provides up-to-the-minute COVID-related travel restrictions. So it's accessible from our website. And let me see if I can get there. And I'll give you a quick view as to where you can find the Okay, so if you go to the Diversity Travel website, just diversitytravel.com, and click on resources, you'll see travel restrictions. It will open up a new page. And all of you are welcome to utilize this tool. You know, again, free of charge. You come in, you enter where you're traveling from, where you're going to. It will ask you if you have connections, if you are vaccinated or not, and then the nationality of your passport. And then once you click on the search, it will come up and tell you what the restrictions are, what you can expect at your transit airports. So it's a really great resource, and all of the information comes from the governments. So you can, once you open up a search, you can actually look to see where the source is that's providing the information, so that you know that you have the best information at hand. And as Nikita said, you need to check this not 2 weeks before you travel, but 3 days. Check it 2 weeks, sure, but then check it again, and then check it again, because the situation is so fluid that chances are what you see today may change tomorrow. So that's it for me. Again, thank you very much, and I'll look forward to any questions when we do the networking session. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Beverly. And finally, we have Craig Thomas, Regional Manager of North America for Qatar Airways from New York, New York. Craig oversees sales for Qatar Airways in North America, leading a team located in both Canada and the United States. His principal responsibility is to maintain and enhance relationships with key customers, with a particular focus on developing corporate and premium leisure business and optimizing channel contribution on the airline's 12 gateways in the region. A South African national, Craig joined Qatar Airways in August 2018. He previously worked for Etihad Airways in a number of international roles, including country postings in South Africa, Australia, Canada, and a regional posting in Thailand, where he was responsible for the airline's commercial activities in Asia Pacific North region. Prior to Etihad, Craig managed travel procurement for De Beers in South Africa and started his airline career in international operations with Virgin Atlantic. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? I'm just always double checking I'm never on mute. I don't want to be that one person that starts yapping away. Thank you, Eric, and everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Nikki did an excellent job setting the scene in terms of very, very useful tips and recommendations for people traveling. Really echoing what Don mentioned and Beverly mentioned. A lot of what we've gone through over the last 15 months has been a really shared experience. Probably one of the first global experiences or global events that has had a truly consistent impact on all segments of the travel community. So you'll find that a lot of what we're dealing with in the USA, we have people dealing with in other parts of the world. So this has truly been one of the world's first major disruptors that's had a truly profound global impact on the way we do things, and certainly will change the way we do things going forward. I'm going to share my screen and really just talk you through very briefly, what has changed. What has changed with Qatar over the past 15 months. We did have to take a number of proactive responses, in regards to COVID. The situation also caused us or kind of forced us to really preempt what we're doing, make some fairly significant changes in terms of the way we fly, where we fly. and certainly has made us a lot more relevant to a lot of the customers that will be on this call. Can everybody see the screen at the moment? Okay, so really the biggest impact for the community on this call is the fact that we started service from Seattle in January this year. This followed hot on the heels of us launching service to San Francisco. We're one of the only global airlines that actually launched several new long-haul destinations in the midst of the pandemic. So very, very pleased to advise that we will be ramping up our Seattle service to a daily operation in July, and that complements daily operations from most of our North American gateways. We returned to Atlanta in early June, and that marked the formal resumption to all of our previous gateways that were served prior to the pandemic. Now, what's really changed with the pandemic is a number of our key markets having been closed. We were really forced to re-look at where we were flying to, where customers were still traveling to, which markets were still open, which markets were accessible for visitors, and a couple of bright spots emerged on the map over the past few months. Africa in particular has emerged as a very, very strong market for us. It's traditionally a market that we didn't actively promote and serve out of the USA. But for a number of reasons, Africa over the past few months has really proved to be a bright spot in terms of our own network presence and where we are seeing demand. From the humanitarian channel, we are seeing ongoing demand into Africa. We've seen a surge in premium leisure interest, customers traveling to Southern Africa on safari, perception and I guess reality there being, safari vacation tends to be safer in terms of you're not sharing that experience with a lot of people, you're spending a lot of time outdoors, you're not going through heavily congested airports and cities. So Africa has actually benefited significantly from a changing emphasis and focus on where people want to travel and then what they want to get out of their travel experience. So this year we have already opened 5 new African gateways. Yesterday we announced that we'll be launching service to Zambia and Zimbabwe. So those have been to Lusaka and Harare effectively, which will take our African footprint to 26 destinations. Significant footprint in Africa. We offer daily connectivity from Seattle to all of our destinations in Africa, including some fairly unique and hard to get to destinations. And I know in the humanitarian business, in the NGO field, there's not a lot of options when you're traveling to the likes of Somalia, to Djibouti, to Rwanda, Uganda, Cote d'Ivoire, and Sudan. And these are all markets where we've gone in, we've opened up their connectivity, we've made an instrumental contribution to either maintaining the supply chain of goods in and out of those markets or to creating new opportunities for the transfer of goods and customers to those markets. What we've learned as a result of this, I guess the pandemic, but the way that it's influenced our network strategy is really not to take any market for granted. I think as an airline traditionally, we relied on predictability of buyer behavior. We relied on year-on-year performance data, on seasonality, on historical trends to really provide an indicator of how we're moving forward. So we really learned that you really can't take anything for granted anymore. You can't take for granted the fact that I guess Europe will always be open to visitors from the USA. You can't take for granted that your biggest traffic flows will always be there. India, for example, with their country being closed to a large extent, some of the world's biggest economies are shut off from each other. In the case of Australia and New Zealand, I don't think people can ever take for granted the freedom to leave their own country anymore. So, these are really unique experiences that we've all gone through. And I think in the back of people's minds, those will stay with them for some time to come. We've also had to pay special attention to an enhanced focus on duty of care, on health and hygiene protocols, not only from individual travelers, but companies sending their travel or their company representatives abroad. How are airlines ensuring that when customers enter the customer care cycle with us, that all of the touch points involving the airline and the personnel, that customers are well taken care of, that international health and hygiene standards are in place, and that we're actually making sure that we're all in compliance with the respective country entry requirements. I think this has been a key learning and something that as a community, we're all going to have to be a lot more focused on. Is nobody can take for granted anymore the fact that your passport country of origin is the sole determinant of where you can and can't travel. We're now having to look at not only dependent on the nationality and the citizenship, it depends on where you're living, where you're traveling from, where you've traveled through, vaccination status, healthcare status, access to income in terms of being able to afford PCR testing pre, during, and post-trip. So a number of other determinants have come into play over the past few months that I think will be with us for a long time to come. Charter flights have become a significant focus for us. These were both passenger and cargo flights. A lot of this spoke to the fact that when the pandemic was at its worst in terms of the disruptive effect on air transport, there were not a lot of options to travel anywhere. So we found that there were a lot of people stranded in either their home country or countries abroad that no longer had air service in and out of those markets. So we operated over 550 charter flights over the past 15 months. You'll see the footprint in Asia and Africa. You know, we went into a number of countries we'd never operated services to, the likes of Botswana, Madagascar, Togo, Burkina Faso. You know, these were all fairly new markets for us that we had specific requirements to operate charter flights into those markets to specifically address in and outbound requirements from customers in those markets. I think this is indicative of the change that's also been made to having to approach risk identification at a macro and a micro level. You know, formally as an airline or as traveling customers, you know, you'd really have a look at kind of a macro risk assessment. It'd be like, what are the key challenges? What is the crime rate in the country? You know, what is the risk of, you know, kind of emergency hospital treatment? But it's really had to go further downstream in terms of having to look at, you know, the drivers of where you're traveling from, your intermediate travel point, where you're traveling to, healthcare servicing those particular markets, the ability to get air travel out if there's an issue, lockdowns, curfews, you know, how does that impact you're traveling to hotels, traveling to and from airports. And a lot of this was, you know, fairly intensive kind of process that we had to go through in kind of operating our own services. And these will be with the traveling public for several months to come. Really, this is going to be our continued focus. Our response to the pandemic, you know, or the COVID pandemic created unprecedented challenges for not only the aviation industry, but the travel industry as a whole. You know, we stepped up to the challenge in terms of making sure that we were able to operate as many services as possible where it was safe and legally permissible to do so. But we've also made sure that we introduced a focus on maintaining the global supply chain, making sure that we're a reliable carrier into a lot of markets where there was very, very limited or no air access whatsoever. And this is something that we'll be continuing to focus on over the next few months, continuing to build our footprint in Africa, in developing and emerging markets, and making sure that one of the biggest economies, the USA, has one-stop access to a lot of these markets over. and doing so in a safe, sustainable, and environmentally friendly way across the value cycle. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. Now we'll go into a Q&A session with all the panelists, and I invite you to add your questions to the Q&A section. And hopefully, if any of our panelists can join us for the networking afterwards, you can ask them questions directly there as well. But I have a question for the entire group, because you're all very in tune with your passenger your passenger experience. What would you say? I mean, we see it all on the news, unruly passengers and things like that. That we see all the negative, but are there things like that, trends that we should be doing, like outside of what Nikki had brought up, the three things that, because when we went to Egypt, that was the first time I'd gotten, and maybe it was bad on me, but the first time I'd gotten medical evac insurance to go overseas. Is that a trend? Is that something that the industry recommends now? I put it out to all the panelists. If you see people doing that, is that a common thing, or it's still not?
I can speak from the nonprofit side of things, not so much on the individual travelers, because we deal more with organizations, but we definitely see a trend in people looking at that medical evacuation insurance and having a plan in place and partnering with organizations like International SOS to ensure that if one of their travelers does have a medical emergency, they're able to respond quickly and have them moved, either evacuated out or taken to a hospital that's been vetted by the organization prior to, and making sure that they accept the insurance, because that's an issue too. Some places they'll want cash depending on where you're traveling to. Yeah, and what we're working with is usually places, many of the places, Craig, that you pointed out on your map, because they're going to some of the more remote areas of the world. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has.
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen is a number of countries have introduced country-specific travel insurance requirements. A lot of countries traditionally, in order to obtain a visa, there were certain requirements for providing proof of travel insurance. We've seen the coverage limits have been increased significantly for some countries. Some of them specifically require COVID coverage, and not all travel insurance comes with that. So we find it's become a bit more of a complex, offering out there. But as an airline, we've always kind of urged customers to purchase travel insurance. And I think this is something that the general traveling public tend to take for granted. I'm always surprised when people do travel abroad, particularly to destinations that might be quite challenging in terms of logistics and infrastructure, kind of saying, well, if something goes wrong, I'll just rely on the airline, or I'll rely on the hotel. And we, as a matter of fact, always urge customers to kind of take out travel insurance, and during COVID times specifically to make sure that they check with the country of arrival exactly what is required to enter that country, that they check with the employer what the duty of care considerations are, and then make sure that there is COVID coverage if required.
Excellent. We also had a question from one of the attendees, Dr. Sendim, in regards to fully vaccinated travelers. Are there any benefits? Are there locations where you would have to show your vaccination card, or is everyone considered the same? I know, like in the Middle East, the testing program was much stricter in the beginning. Is there a program that eases that testing requirements if you're fully vaxxed?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one, Eric. And it varies. You know, every market, every country, they have their own unique set of protocols. Take, for instance, you know, Germany, a good example that just reopened on Friday. So if you're fully vaccinated and you're a US citizen, you can enter. You don't need a COVID test. If you're not vaccinated, you can still travel and not have a quarantine, but you have to show proof of a negative PCR test within 48 hours of your departure. Country, you know, not too far away, the Netherlands, you don't have to have that testing requirement when you enter. And that's just two countries. And for every country, there's their own unique permutation of quarantine, vaccinations, testing requirements, etc. So that makes life very complicated for airlines, for passengers, which is where I think the communication piece is so important, that we need to provide customers up-to-date information as soon as possible. But yeah, there's definitely additional legwork and burden on the customer to make sure that they're educated on those requirements before they travel.
Excellent. And this next question is very driven to the freight market, and but also for strategic planning. So it falls into the realm of some of you. So a lot of us learned the really closely the carrying capacity of different aircraft during the pandemic, and when Craig was mentioning the charter flights for cargo and for passengers, we all learned that the 777 carries much more cargo than a lot of other aircraft, and gave those operators a significant advantage to operate the ghost freighter flights because they could carry a lot more haul. So so I wanted to see if maybe Delta would speak to if that kind of changes your kind of thinking for the future of what kind of aircraft you would operate internationally, if you would bring in more of a mix of 777s. And Craig, if you might speak to like how big of an advantage was that for Qatar in the pandemic?
You know, since you directed that question to Delta, I'll start, Eric. Yeah, we definitely saw that carriers who had a strong cargo business, for whatever reason, were able to weather the crisis a little bit better. One of our good partners in Korean Air has a very strong cargo business, and they were able to grow that quite significantly during the pandemic. Yeah, every aircraft obviously has different cargo and passenger characteristics. We had a very small 777 fleet that we elected to retire during the pandemic. Doesn't necessarily speak to what our future fleets are going to be. We're always looking at what's best for our needs. But will cargo revenue be a bigger consideration for us in the future? Probably, but not ready to discuss anything beyond that right now.
Excellent.
Yeah, from our perspective, even prior to the pandemic, we had a dedicated cargo fleet of almost 30 aircraft. So cargo's always been a fairly sizable contributor. It's given the location of Qatar, it's kind of during the blockade, it was completely blocked off from its neighbors. So the country was 100% reliant on airlift for all goods coming in and out of the country. Cargo was a vital component. It continues to be so, but a lot of this is also cyclical. There was a shortage of cargo availability, particularly for carrying PPE when it was most needed, because the majority of the world's air cargo is carried in belly freight of passenger flights, and with passenger flights essentially being reduced by 90%, that created a significant bottleneck in terms of cargo demand or supply. I think that will start leveling out, as passenger flights start resuming, there's more regular supply of cargo capacity. I think it's cyclical, but I think to what I mentioned earlier, I think there's an awareness out there now never to take for granted the impact that air travel has on the global supply chain, on keeping people connected. And shipping is no different. You look at the Evergreen ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal, being stuck there for a week, caused a major bottleneck of kind of freighters and ocean freighters that had a kind of rolling effect 3 or 4 weeks down the line in terms of access to commodities and supplies. So I think air travel, the importance of cargo has been kind of highlighted, and I think there will be kind of a rebalancing in terms of contribution by freight, dedicated freighters, and passenger aircraft.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, we've come to the end of our hour for presentations. Thank you very much, panel.
Thank you.
It was very enjoyable and very informative. And I invite you all to join us for the networking that we're going to have now. It's Pratima has just put the link for networking into the Zoom chat. So if everyone can click on that in just a moment. If you're in a room where they need an icebreaker, I want everyone to just think about the last time they traveled internationally and what that was, and just share that with the group. I think that might be fun. So with that, I want to thank again our great panel of partners, because they are partners in this whole endeavor. We really want them to be successful. They're all fantastic people. We work with them every single day, and you would not believe how hard it is. We've had to shuffle this panel several times because everyone is still so busy, and I appreciate them, and I hope you do too. So with that, I'd like to shift us to the networking portion. And again, big claps for our panel, and hope to see you on the other side. Take care.
Thanks, Eric.